We have another special guest coming up, Mr. Phil Macans. I think I said his name right. He is going to talk about artificial intelligence and whether it can save us. Now, there is literally millions of medical studies out there, a whole corpus of literature that is just mind-blowingly huge. And very little of it is actually online. And Phil takes a look at this and he says, well, AI, what it does, it can cross-reference a lot of these studies. But there's really so much that has not been dug up yet. There's so much that we've already discovered that we could use to find out new innovations in the medical field. Now, Phil has a few wow factors to talk about and stuff that he's come across. Things like eye drops to reverse cataracts, a skin cream to remove cancer lesions, things like a combination of minerals to reduce macular degeneration in your eyesight, and some short-chain peptides in food, for example, that are actually gene switches. And stuff like there's also a hormone that can reduce hearing loss. So you might want to listen. If you can't hear that well, Mel, it'll be recorded and you can listen a little more closely. So Phil has a great pedigree, and I can't think of anyone better to address the longevity conference than him. He's got qualifications both in the UK, in the US, in nutrition, biochemistry, and pharmacy. He co-founded the International Anti-Aging Systems Group back in 1991. Since then, he's dedicated his time to the pursuit of studying anti-aging medicines. Today, he's the editor of Aging Matters magazine, assistant editor of Lifespan Medicine Journal, director of the British Longevity Society. Hey, that's great for us. Board member of the World Council of Preventative Medicine, and also moderator of the Profound Health Summit. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mr. Phil Macans, or Dr. Phil Macans. So take it away, Phil.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there this morning. I've been traveling a lot lately, and to be honest with you, I'm not quite sure what time zone I'm on anymore. I think you can see my PowerPoint. That looks like my PowerPoint there. So I'll just call it up if I may. So as the chairman so eloquently said, it covered most of my topics there. And I'm asking the question, can AI save us? So as you'll see, it's a very simple proposal. It's single-minded, but I think it's a big problem that we face today. So very quick background. I helped with my brother to form this group that we call International Anti-Aging Systems, or IS. We did that in 1991. So we were one of the forerunners in the world of preventative and regenerative medicine, anti-aging, if you prefer to call it that. Some people get hung up on semantics, but that's all it means. And I remember asking him, because 1991, of course, was pretty much pre-internet, still using fax machines and overhead projectors and things like that. And I remember asking him, because we realized that there's so much hidden in the literature, that, there is so much literature. I'll throw some numbers at you shortly. And my little joke is, if you want to keep something a secret, publish it. Because as we'll see, who's reading everything? So I remember asking my brother in 1991, so where should we start looking for amazing health and medical facts? I remember him saying, I don't know. So I said, well, what do you think we should be looking for? And I remember him saying, I don't know. So we got off to a flying start. But what we've tried to do over the past 35 years is try to help physicians and their patients find relevant information that is happening somewhere in the world today. And we help to publish those facts, and we also help to find the products and the protocols too. So that's the essence of what we do. And here is the massive literature. As you can see, PubMed, which is considered to be the gold standard for most docs, has over 7 million free medical answers from over 10,000 journals. and yet many more are behind pay-for walls. And there's been studies saying that, and this is 2010, which is, let's be honest, quite some time ago, that there are over 50 million scholarly articles. And of course, this literature stretches back to the 19th century and is in many different languages. And Medline suggests that there's an average of 800,000 new citations added every year. So I like to, when I'm in front of a live audience, I like to say, put my hand up and say, right, who's read it all then? Come on, show of hands. And of course, nobody's read it all. Of course they haven't. It's ridiculous. And yet, perhaps the most shocking statistic on here is an estimate that less than 10% of the world's information is online. 10%. So can you imagine every time you type into Google and you think, well, wow, I've got the world at my fingertips. Well, you've got a bit of it, but you certainly haven't got it all. And so we think about artificial intelligence, and of course, most people think of this, thanks to the popular film. Let's call it bad AI. Um, I'm not here to discuss what Elon Musk thinks or anything else. I'm just got one proposal, and that is, can you imagine if all the world's information was online? All the libraries of the world are still the repository of all the information. Have you been to the New York Library? Have you been to the London Library? Have you been to the Jakarta Library? Have you been to the Ulaanbaatar Library? You know, can you imagine if we could go to the libraries of the world, get all this information uploaded, and of course, all the language translated for us? Can you imagine having a search engine that could actually type in whatever your issue is, whatever your concern is, and come back with the relevant scientific published information? Perhaps if we could do that, we'd actually learn what we've already discovered. And that's the problem. Now, some of you may be sitting there and saying, let's think of this as good AI. You might say, well, hang on a minute, Phil. I know that IBM has built a computer that they call Dr. Watson. And Dr. Watson surely is the repository of what you're talking about. Well, yes and no. It is a compendium of the current standardized, by which I mean approved medicine. And we could get into a whole topic about what's approved and what isn't. But it is actually only there to compute the existing practiced medicine. So if you put in some oncology problem, it would come back and tell you how to use chemotherapy, radiotherapy, etc. You could say that it could be a double check to make sure the physician hasn't forgotten something. Yes, I would accept that. But I suggest that in terms of furthering medical advancement, it's not fit for purpose.
Oh, hi, Phil. Excuse me. You were still on your first slide or viewing the program. Sorry about that. I should have
Right.
said something sooner.
Can you see anything there?
Now we see Terminator.
Oh, I'll keep it on this screen. This might be a bit better. Okay, so that was the bad AI, if you hadn't already guessed. And then I said this was the good AI. This was Dr. Watson. Obviously, that is not Dr. Watson. That's just a figure. But I'm just making the point that it's only there to cross-reference the approved medicine and not actual published, global published stuff. And so in the 35 years I've been having a go at this, I've found a few stories which I call wow factors, which I hope to share a little bit with you. And I hope you will agree with me that they are indeed wow factors. But I pose the question, of course, that how many more wow factors are hidden in the literature? What could we discover? As I say, my favorite line, can we actually learn what we've already discovered as a species? I think that would be fascinating. Look, new research is always good and is always necessary, but how often are we actually undertaking research for which answers already exist? Are we wasting our time and resources? As I say, surely we should actually want to cross-reference what we've already published. So there are 5 things I just want to mention to you tonight. One is N-acetylcarnosine and cataract. I'll get into a little bit of detail for you. Another is a substance called celestines and skin cancers. Another is melatonin and age-related macular degeneration. Another are peptide bioregulators as gene switches. And the last one is aldosterone, which is an adrenal hormone, and your hearing and our hearing. So let's start with N-acetylcarnosine and cataract. N-acetylcarnosine is the acetylated form of carnosine. Carnosine is a dipeptide. That means it's made up of 2 amino acids, naturally occurring. It's found in very dark green leafy foods. It's also found at reasonable quantities in chicken, predominantly in the black meat of chicken. And this research was conducted in Moscow by the late Dr. Mark Babajev, and it was done at the Helmholtz Eye Institute. Now, the Helmholtz Eye Institute, pretty famous eye center, they actually gave the world cataract surgery many years ago. But in the 90s, they realized, as we all know now, that the world is getting older. You know, in a few years' time, there'll be more people over 60 than there are under 15. That's the first time that will have happened. So the population pyramid is kind of changing to upending. And of course, with a lot more elderly people about, unless we change the model and we get into preventative and regenerative medicine, we're going to be cursed with all the problems that we see today. So how do we look after these folks? Well, back in the 90s, the Russians said to themselves, we won't have enough cataract surgeons to perform the operations necessary because senile cataract, to give it its correct terminology, you know, affects mostly people over the age of 55. And it's pretty prevalent, you know, that the older we get, the more likely we are to have a cataract. So they looked into and they found that this naturally occurring peptide, carnosine, as I told you about, is actually used by the eye to help protect itself. And if you don't know how much detail you want me to get into, but I'll give you a little bit. And they started studies with it. Now, they obviously did animal studies and then they moved on to human studies. What you're actually looking at there in that figure is a rabbit's eye. So on the far left, you see the size of the cataracts, pretty large in that eye, isn't it? And then over the months that the eye drops are applied, it's 2 drops twice a day, you see how the cataract is getting smaller. Isn't that nice? Now, I can tell you that in dogs and rabbits, the eye drops work very quickly. And there's a reason for that, is that in us, as humans, we have an enzyme called kininase, and it actually breaks down carnosine. So whether we like it or not, when we apply carnosine to ourselves, including eating it, some of it will get broken down. But in dogs and rabbits, none of it gets broken down. So it works particularly quickly in dogs and rabbits. But that's just to show you the effect there. So cut to the chase, and we look at human studies. Well, they showed that at 5-6 months of use, over 41% had a very significant improvement to their eyesight. Nearly 89% had improved glare sensitivity. That's normally noted as driving at nighttime. People, you know how it is with the car coming towards you, and you can't look at the headlights. The glare is too strong. That's normally the thing that most people notice, and also improved color perception, visual acuity. 90%. So it was a nice, I'm not saying that every single person got rid of all their cataract, but it was nice to see that a very large percentage of people aided their eyesight, aided their cataracts by using an eye drop. So let's have a look at one of those. So here's a schematic of the eye where we see, you know, the cornea, the iris, the lens, and there, of course, is the lens, and it's surrounded by the aqueous humor. It's kind of a liquidy jelly substance. And so when you apply these eye drops, they pass through the membranes. It gets into the aqueous humor surrounding the lens, and the lens has crystallins within it, and these crystallins they cross-link. The word is glycation, the correct word, and it's a matter of proteins meeting glucose, meeting oxygen, and becoming impaired. And when they become too impaired, the cataract forms. Cataract, by the way, is a Greek word. It simply means waterfall. So one could imagine that if you have a cataract, it's a bit like peering through water, that the effect is rather blurry. So what happens with the carnosine, it actually seems to prevent proteins from cross-linking. It's even theorized it can break existing cross-links, which is a rare thing, actually. The abbreviation is AGE, which refers to advanced glycated end products. But on the right there, you see a lady's eye, and in the top, you see her cataract. And it's a bit like it took me a while to see it myself, but they described it as a bat. If you can see it, it's like a bat flying towards you with its wings out. Here's the head of the bat flying towards you. But you can see that after 5 months of treatment, just 2 drops twice a day, that there is no longer a cataract in her eye. So in this particular case, there was complete reversal of cataract. This is an eye drop. This is nothing more than that. This is not the lens being replaced, etc., etc. So I hope you'd agree with me. That's a bit of a wow factor. If you want me to get in, if anyone wants to ask me a question about how it can do this and what the problem is, or if it's good for glaucoma, it does have an effect on glaucoma, and it's also particularly good at dry eyes as well. And I don't know how much detail you want or how much time I have, but if there's questions at the end, I'll be happy to talk a bit about that. If you're interested, like me, in references, then here are some of the journals that have published this information. And here is a book that is written by a friend of mine, Dr. Marius Kriazis, for which I help collect the data. It contains information about this eye drop, which today is branded as CanC, and other things, one of which we will actually get into in a moment. So, all to do with eyesight, of course. Now, this gentleman here, his name is Bill Cham. And unbelievably, I was in Bali last week and I met him, which was only the second time I have actually met him in person. And Bill is from the island of Vanuatu. And if you don't know where that is, it's not far from New Zealand. And it's a fascinating story. He made this his life work, actually. He's a biochemist. And he made this his life's work. When he was a young man and he walked around his island, he noticed how cows and horses would rub themselves up against a local plant, which they call the devil's apple, but it's a relation to eggplant. And he asked the farmers, why are they doing this? And the farmers would say, well, when they have skin lesions, they seem to do this. You know, it's that innate thing that we probably have but have lost, but animals, of course, still have. And he said to them, well, does it help? And the farmer said, well, yes, it does, funny enough. So that intrigued him. So he went on to find out the active ingredient within the plant, and it's called celestines. And it reacts with a coating on a cancer cell, ribose coating, which is not present on a healthy cell. It's only present on a cancer cell. And he, over many years, I'm talking decades now, I'm doing this in a very short way, he gave it to many, many, many patients. In fact, he's estimated, he's documented more than 80,000 patient cases with 100% success rate. So let's have a look at what I'm talking about. So what we're referring to here is squamous cell carcinomas and basal cell carcinomas. And here we see before, during, and after. There is no surgery here. There is no chemotherapy here. There is no radiotherapy here. There is no plastic surgery here. Okay, this is just applying the cream twice a day onto the affected area. There are instances where it won't work. Again, I'll get into the whys and wherefores if anyone wants me to. But how amazing is it that within 6 to 12 weeks of using a cream, that skin cancers can be removed, and all documented, all in the literature. Here are some of those references. Here is a book that Dr. Cham has made that you can find at the usual places, and you can see many references in it. And as I say, this has been published for decades, and yet how many dermatologists know about this around the world? I can tell you now, very, very few of them. Here's another one I like. This study was conducted by a friend of mine. He's an Italian gentleman by the name of Dr. Walter Pierpoli, with other people as well. And Walter, you could call him Dr. Melatonin. He's published many, many, many books on melatonin. One of his first was The Melatonin Miracle, which really kicked off the interest in melatonin. A previous lady talking about things, of course, the melatonin from the pineal gland, which could be the center of consciousness. I love the pineal gland. I could go on about it all day, but I won't, I promise you. But in this study, published in the New York Academy of Sciences, that's a pretty prestigious journal, in 2005, quite a long time ago, there were 100 patients, 110 eyes. As you see, those people had an average age of 71, and they were afflicted with both wet and dry macular degeneration. Now, in my country, in the UK, if you go in, and the dry is much more common. Um, if you went in with a dry macular degeneration, and you can see in the picture, by the way, the kind of effects that a macular degeneration may have on your vision. That's just to give an example. They would tell you there's nothing they can do, and they'll send you home, and you say, well, what do I do now? And they'll say, wait until it gets worse, until it becomes wet, come back and we'll treat you. And the treatment in many countries is one of 4 drugs which are injected into the eye. That's something to look forward to. And they do that perhaps every 3 months. Those drugs are very expensive. They run to about $1,000 a shot. And the efficacy after 2 years of that is about a 50% chance of an improvement. So it's not brilliant by any measure. And yet, in this trial, what they gave patients was a combination of 3 milligrams of melatonin with 50 micrograms of selenium and 8.7 milligrams of zinc. And this was taken as a tablet at nighttime. Again, there's always devil in the detail, and anyone wants to, I'll go into a bit more. But here's the outcomes at 6 months. 93% of the patients arrested or improved their condition. 54% improved other ophthalmic issues that they had, and there were no side effects or contraindications. Now, there were some side effects because of the nature of melatonin. People had improved sleep. As a result of the improved sleep, they had more energy in the daytime, and they also felt more well-being. So I would suggest they're positive side effects. And there is a source for you if you want to go and read the study. Here are some what they call fundus pictures from that study. I'm not going to read every single one for you. I'm sure you can all read yourself. But these are 3 different people before and after. And as you can see just from the photographs, there were significant improvements to the macular degeneration and their eyesight in every single case. So that's nice, isn't it? And by the way, if you're wondering what kind of cost that treatment, I suggested to you that the drugs would cost about $4,000 a year. With these treatments, with zinc and selenium and melatonin, I would suggest to you you'd probably get it for around $60, maybe $100. So you can see that this is a win-win on so many levels. Another thing I'd like to mention to you is the discovery of what's become now known as peptide bioregulators. Now, the picture here is, unfortunately, he died earlier in the year. It's a great, sad, a real genius. I had the pleasure of knowing him. This is Professor Vladimir Kavinson from St. Petersburg. And it was his discovery that short chain peptides, these are peptides made up of no more than 6 amino acids, are found in food, okay, and they act as gene switches. They directly act as gene switches. They don't even go through receptors. And they work orally because food works orally, right? So it makes sense, doesn't it? And then some people say, oh, how can that be, Phil? Proteins get broken down in the stomach. These are very, very short chains of peptides. They're nano-sized as well. And it's got all this, they've studied it, they've got the studies, it survives stomach degradation, it passes into blood, it interacts with the gene, and it will either silence or activate a gene. In this respect, they're quite remarkable. They go both directions. Nobody fully understands that, but it could also explain adaptogens, the kind of plants that you can take that will rebalance hormones. Um, I think these are working. I'd like to know if those adaptogen plants have these same peptides. I think they possibly do because these peptides are in plants and they are in animals and they are in us. They're very ubiquitous. So when I was studying my first degree in London in 1981, I do recall the lecturer putting a slide up on the overhead projector one day, and it was a pie chart. And he said, "This is typically what you find in food." And there was X percentage of vitamins, there was X percentage of minerals, there's X percentage of fats, and then there was mostly fiber. I think, if my memory serves me right, about 55% was fiber. And I remember having a thought that day in the classroom, and that was, well, either fiber's a lot more important than we think. And remember, in 1981, people weren't thinking too much about fiber then. Um, or we've missed something, because I'm firmly of the belief that nature wastes nothing, absolutely nothing. So fast forward to 2010, when I first met Professor Cavenson, when he was lecturing at a meeting in Istanbul, and he described this discovery of short chain peptides in food acting as gene switches. And it was like a light bulb moment for me over my head, an epiphany, because it took me back to that classroom on that day when I asked myself that question: have they missed something? And indeed they have. Listen, I don't think that's the end of the story by any means. Who knows what else is in food with magnetism, light, goodness knows what else. But there are peptides in food that act as gene switches. And in my view, this explains the epigenetics of the diet. And I helped with him and another professor in Russia to write this scientific book, which is shown on the right, which we entitled Peptides in the Epigenetic Control of Aging. And the book on the left, again written by my friend Dr. Maris Grazis, is a public introduction to this discovery. So if you're a scientist, go for the one on the right. If you're a member of the public, go for the one on the left. And it will give you a good background into this discovery. And believe it or not, this was a Soviet military secret 40 years ago. Okay. It was, they ended up giving it to their troops, their elite troops, to their cosmonauts, and to their Olympic teams. Okay. This is a big, big story. And right now, in the world of anti aging medicine, I would humbly suggest that peptides are the biggest noise. Everyone's talking peptides right now. Now, I mentioned earlier about macular degeneration. This next gentleman I'm going to show you on the slide here, he's an American doctor. He has a clinic in Tacoma, Washington, near Seattle, and a very large clinic, actually has 200 doctors working under him. And he sends his university students off to the Seattle Library to unearth things. And he rediscovers. You know, they say that science rediscovers itself every 25 years. Well, this gentleman has a lot of experience in that. By the way, several years ago, he was giving a money-back guarantee to patients, saying, "I will reverse your wet or dry macular degeneration, or I will give you your money back." And he was using the protocol I just told you about, plus he used some other injected minerals. And the FDA actually came to him and said, "You can't do that." And he said, "Well, why not? Why can't I offer patients their money back if I don't reverse the problem?" And they said, "You can't do that because it's unfair to doctors who cannot offer a money back guarantee." So you begin to understand that health and medicine is a different world to everywhere else. But that's a true story. But in this particular case, he and his team rediscovered research from the 1940s that indicated that people who have hearing difficulty that's not caused by, obviously, damage to the ear just through aging are often low in a hormone called aldosterone. It's produced by the adrenal glands. And when they pop up their aldosterone levels, their hearing returns. Okay, they think they know why. It's part of the messaging between the ear and the hearing centers in the left side of the brain. The reason is that it's well known that words spoken into one's right ear are remembered better than in the left ear, because there's literally a hardwire. You know that the left brain, the right side, the right left brain, the right side. So basically, there's a hardwire to the hearing center in the left, whereas on the left it goes to the right and then crosses back over the corpus callosum. So that's a known fact. But Dr. Wright found that when he re-topped up the amount. It's very small amounts, actually. I mean, orally, it's about 125 micrograms a day. But we helped to develop an ear drop. And a doctor friend of mine who has this problem, I asked him one day, I said, how do you use it? And he said, well, I get up in the morning, have a shower, I go to breakfast. During breakfast, I put a couple of drops in both ears. I put a little bit of cotton wool in there just to keep it in there for a while. He said, by the time I've got to the car, the cotton wool's come out. He said, I drive to the office and I have 6, 7, 8 hours of nice, clear hearing while I'm there. So by the time I get back home, sort of 5, 6 in the evening, he said it's wearing off. So I said to him, well, I suppose you put another couple of drops back in the ear then, do you? He said, oh, no, no, no. He said, it's not so important for me to hear completely well in the evenings. Okay, no comment. So isn't that fascinating? You know, a lot of people out there buying very expensive hearing aids, and yet it couldn't be nothing more than just a particular hormone being deficient. Because as you know, as we age, most, not all, hormones go in decline. So I think I hope you'll agree with me that what you've heard are wow factors. You might be asking, how come? And I don't think there is one clear answer, but there is dogma, there is resistance to change, there are vested interests, of course. There are people who make good money out of existing technologies and they don't want them to be changed. The patent system in medicine is wrong. Um, One of the problems is that drug approval now is so inhibitantly expensive. The first thing any drug company will ask is, can we get a securing patent? If your answer is no, because it's a natural molecule, they're not interested. Because I was in California in September and I heard the great Jonathan E. Maud, who's America's leading attorney to fight the FDA. He's had 13 victories against the FDA. And he said the latest figures show that the average cost of drug approval in the United States is $3.2 billion. Okay, 3.2 thousand million dollars. So you understand why they're asking for a controlling patent. So we have, listen, people need to be recompensed for the research they did, the discoveries they made. I fully accept that. But we're going to have to find another way of getting people to be rewarded whilst making sure that amazing breakthroughs reach the marketplace. It's crazy the system we have. And so that's, as I pointed out, this is the adversity against natural agents. If you want to learn more about what we do, we have this free digital magazine. It's called Aging Matters. We produce them when we can. It used to be 4 times a year. At the moment, it's about 2 times a year. But hey, it's free. So you can download these, and I'll show you in just a second where you can get hold of them. And this is where you can reach me. If you, this is showing the magazine. This is showing our main resource. And guess what? We have a YouTube channel. We have Twitter accounts and other things. So if you want to see me interview people or read articles and what have you, this is the place to go. And I'd like to leave you with this last slide, if I may, and I hope you will agree with me. Isn't it true that we go through life and we have thousands of problems, but when you have a health problem, suddenly you've only got one problem? And I liken it to when you get on an aircraft and they say to you, if the oxygen goes low, the mask will come down. Put your mask on first before helping others. And this is true with health, isn't it? We can't help anybody else if we are not fit and healthy. So it's number one, isn't it? It's job one that we have to remain fit and healthy so we can help all the people around us. And the last lady was very eloquent in the whole consciousness thing. And so I'd like to leave this thought. I sometimes wonder if the Beatles had it right all along when they said all you need is love. And my favorite group happens to be Roxy Music, and they had a big hit with Love is the Drug. But as a former pharmacist, I'd just like to remind you, it's still important to get the dose right. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, far away. Hello.
Great job, Phil. That was an amazing and fascinating presentation. And I know every one of us will think of your presentation when they have a particular medical problem. Wow, Phil gave that presentation like 8 years ago, and now I have this issue that I might want to look into solving. So I think you provided a tremendous amount of food for thought and helpful knowledge that will spur people to think of your presentation. And if you could just show again the links to your YouTube channel and your site and stuff for the anti-aging publication, so people can take note of it.
How's that?
Excellent. We'll leave that up for a second, and let's see if anybody else has questions from the audience. President Vitt has a question.
Yes. Hello, Vitt.
Hello. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can. I can see you as well.
Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, so I'm quite excited, about the recommendations. I think the skin cancer really looks miraculous. Never heard about that one. And the hearing thing, I will test it on my son that has some small hearing problem on one of the ears. So thanks for that as well.
How old is your son, Vitt? How old is your son?
He is 8 now.
Okay. Well, it's going to be difficult for children because but if you can get his aldosterone levels checked and see what's going on, it's not a difficult hormone to test for.
Yeah, we'll see. I will just look into that more deeply. And I'm quite interested, like in practical ways, that the peptides. What kind of therapy or medicine would you recommend in the peptide industry?
Well,
that
there are two branches at the moment, and I call them the Russian peptides because the work of Kavinson and his team, they created 21 different natural peptides from different glands and tissues. And then I've got what I call the American peptides, which are principally synthetic based. And there are lots of people giving podcasts about things like BCP 157 and PT 141. They haven't even got names, they're all like kind of experimental. I've mainly focused on the Russian ones myself personally, and it is the most amazing story. And today, the leading doctor in this field is a guy called Dr. Bill Lawrence, who's based in Atlanta in America. And he's had 150 people in clinical trials over the last 4 years using what were the Soviet protocols. And he gives the most incredible lectures. I mean, if you're really into this longevity space, you'll know about telomeres, you'll know about DNA methylation and such like. Well, he's shown that these peptides improve both of them. In other words, they lengthen telomeres, they improve DNA methylation. This is a whole subject by itself, I'm sure you appreciate. But just recently, and I mean recently because I was in Bali last week, and he presented there his latest data of organ regeneration. So it's something really fundamental. But if people are new to this, I would recommend those books as a starting point for them to get into this.
All right, so please do send me some concrete products which we should also look into. This is one of my to do. Actually, I've conducted a quite expensive longevity clinic, experiment on myself last year, and peptides was one of the things that I'm still supposed to do. One more thing, what about losing hair? Any particular recommendation?
Well, I'm probably not the best person to ask that question too, but I do wish there was something really miraculous. At the moment, I think there's a lot of talk. Here's the really amazing news that's so new it's weeks old, okay? The Japanese have just started, I know it's not hair, but bear with me. The Japanese have just started human trial in September with peptides to, wait for it, regrow teeth. Okay, so I could go even madder and tell you about something else, but you'll think I'm a lunatic. Basically, I do believe we are like salamanders, that we can regrow stuff. We just have to find the triggers. So I'm pretty confident that they will find a trigger for hair regrowth as well.
Okay, we've got you full screen finally.
Oh, don't want to scare the children.
Well, you packed the room so with your presentation,
Yeah.
so that's awesome.
All
It's
right,
great
all
to
right.
see you now,
I
Phil.
think that's it from me. But if you could just send me more links to the peptides and
Sure.
more links potentially if you have some gray hair restoration and also links, so that would be lovely.
We
Sure.
have a question from David. Please approach the stage.
I have one question. Thank you for the wow moments, actually. We got them
Thank
very
you.
interesting. But did I miss the relation to artificial intelligence? I didn't quite get it.
Well, mine was just a proposal, David. It was to say that the world's information is still hidden in the libraries of the world. I'm not denying it's an enormous amount of work, but somebody has got to try and go to those libraries and scan in, upload, whatever. And then we need an incredible search engine, which I would suggest would be powered by AI, in order to cross-reference all that. And we would discover things that are just hidden from us. As I say, it's my joke. If you want to keep it a secret, publish it. I think that there is research going on in the world today that the answers have already been found, but who knows that information is buried in some library somewhere.
You're totally right. I agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll take it. Thank you. Well, David, you know how the AI works. It searches online stuff or databases that it has access to. With what Phil was talking about, there's such a large body of medical literature that goes back centuries, even, and to use that, to have AI harness all that data and information and put it in ways that we can sort of harvest would be groundbreaking.
Basically, we could reclaim the lost knowledge.
Yeah, I know some of our people are actually our representative in Switzerland, Pavel Pospischal, has founded a company to do that. And so he's a chemist by trade, and they've been using certain forms of artificial intelligence to come up with new chemical formulas applied to different, combinations of molecules, et cetera. And I think he would be definitely very, very interested in that topic as well. We'll put you in touch with him. Yeah, we will.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a Russian guy. I'm going to mispronounce his name, Alex Zenarekhov or something like that. Something similar, and he has quite a well-known AI-driven company that the pharma companies love using in order to test drugs even before they get to animals or humans to see if they're worthwhile. So there's huge. I appreciate that the implications for AI are absolutely massive. Absolutely massive. But I was just looking at it from one perspective.
Absolutely. Do we have any other questions? Yes, we do. Lala, yes.
Do I go that way or that way?
Then face the camera and speak
Hello.
into the mic.
Is it Brian?
Phil.
Phil.
Phil. Hello, Phil.
Hello.
Talking about the ears. So is that just general lack of hearing, or would the drops assist with things like imbalance disorders, etc.? Is that in your remit to answer?
That's an interest. Well, yes, actually, it would, because aldosterone, if you look at its traditional orthodox treatment, it's for people who basically feel better lying down than they do standing up. And so it's prescribed for that actual orthodox reason. But in terms of hearing, it would appear to be a mechanism between the little hairs, of course, that are vibrating within the inner ear and the hearing centers in the brain. It seems to have a communication role. Now, there's a doctor on the island of Hawaii, lovely chap by the name of Dr. Rich Littman. And Rich has done quite a bit of work in this area. And he says that aldosterone is involved with the volume of hearing, whereas another hormone, abbreviated to IGF-1, known as insulin-like growth factor 1, is involved in the detail of hearing. But most people, let's be honest, it's volume that their problem lies with.
Does that answer your question? Okay, Lala. Thank you, Phil. Do we have any other questions from the audience for Dr. Phil? Okay, on that, we'll wrap up your presentation. Thank you for such an engaging and interesting presentation, Phil. I think
Thank
we'd
you.
love to have you again at another event that we're hosting. And
I'd love to have been there with you. If I hadn't got back from such a long journey very recently, I'd have been there. But next time, hopefully.
Well, you're welcome to come to ARC Liberland Village here in Apatin, Serbia at any time. We'll set you up here.
I'll let you into a secret. I'm a libertarian, so I'm sure I'd enjoy being there.
We won't tell anyone, but you know, you'll be amongst family then, Phil. So it was a real pleasure to have you tonight, and you can stick around. We have another person coming up. Let's give another round of applause for Phil. And we can share your links on our social media and in our groups as well, because I think a lot of people will be sincerely interested in that.
Thank you very much indeed.